The problem with India's unemployment debate is that it has become too political. There are multiple sources of data, so it's actually quite easy to pick and choose statistics that suit your narrative. I mean, check out YouTube. On the one hand, you will find anti-establishment commentators and YouTubers take so much enthusiasm in highlighting one piece of scary data from some report, another concerning sentence from another report, and these random facts and figures are all whizzing in and out of their videos with some really tense music in the background. And you're left wondering, oh my god, this is terrible. The government is actually useless. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have pro-government economists, commentators, ministers, and if you listen carefully to them, they do the exact opposite. Ignore the embarrassing bits of data and highlight the ones that look good. They will gaslight you into thinking that the problem is not with India's unemployment, but it is with you in questioning the economy and the government. Both these sets of people very strategically refuse to give any airtime to any analysis that doesn't fit their political narrative. But here's the hard truth. The employment data for India is at times confusing and often contradictory. Here's a simple example. Government's official data has unemployment rate sliding down to 3.1% in 2023. Yet, a popular private agency, CMIE, the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, that does its own survey, will tell you that the unemployment rate is not falling to 3%, but it is actually quite elevated at 8 to 9%. Now, which one do you believe? Is unemployment going up or is it going down? Which also means that if someone has a pro-government or anti-government agenda, they can easily paint very different pictures to suit their politics. And look, I don't blame them, because for better or for worse, unemployment remains a hot political issue. BJP keeps saying that we are generating lakhs of jobs. Congress is busy telling we are losing lakhs of jobs, and their respective cheerleaders are happily cherry-picking the data to peddle these narratives. The biggest loser is you, the public, who deserves to know what is actually happening to the state of India's employment minus all of this politics, which is what I hope to offer you in this video. For those of you who are wondering whether or not I am biased myself, well, all I can say in my defense is that I have made videos that have gotten people in the comment section to call me Andhbhakt, and I've also made videos that have made people call me NGO toolkit economist. And I think it's a good sign being hated by both sides of the aisle, because that means that you're managing to stay faithful to what the data is telling you. Hello and welcome to The Bond Economist, your one-stop destination for professional advice on the economy. My name is Aurodeep Nandi, and today I'm here to talk about India's employment situation, the good, the bad and the ugly. As always, if you like this kind of content, please do subscribe and spread the word. This is a very small channel at this point. It relies heavily on your word of mouth to expand. So please do share this video in your network. And if you'd like to support me, there's the super thanks button below and a buy me a coffee link in the comment section. First things first, let's clarify something. India's biggest problem is not unemployment. Our bigger problem is not unemployment, it is underemployment. We have crores of people that are part of what I like to call the time pass population. What does this mean? So our working age population, the people in the 15 to 64 age group, the most productive age group, is around 68% of our total population. And that's one of the highest globally. That comes to around 96 crore people. But are 96 crore working age people actually seeking jobs, or are they working? No. Only 58% of our adult population is. So that's around 57 to 58 crores. This is called the labor force participation rate, the share of people who are working or are unemployed and seeking for a job. Our labor force participation rate is abysmally low. Compared to our 58%, China's participation rate, for instance, is 66%. So of the working age population of 96 crore, only 58 crore are in the labor force, which means that the remaining are out of the job market. These include women who are told ki ghar sambhalo. These involve lakhs of youth preparing endlessly for civil service exams, neither getting employed nor getting educated or skilled. By the way, the government's own data suggests that 1 in every 3 young people fall in this category. And then we have people who are struggling so much to get a job that they have left the job market altogether. So, to put it in perspective, our total population is around 140 crore. The set of people outside the labor force is over 40 crore. And the problem is not just with the people who are not doing or seeking work. There are a lot of people who are employed according to labor statistics but are actually underemployed. We see examples of this all around us. Apartment security guards busy watching reels on their phones. Drivers reclined in cars for hours watching reels on their phones. Helpers in kirana stores lounging next to the cold drinks fridge watching reels on their phones. People operating lifts in India, their whole job description is literally pressing buttons and watching reels on their phones. Know someone in your office who takes 2-hour long lunch breaks, God knows how many smoke breaks, and is constantly chatting with people, and whenever you see them, they're watching reels on their phones? Our labor productivity levels is one of the worst globally, which brings me to India's next problem. The quality of our employment is terrible. Some 57% of our workforce is self-employed. Another 22% are casually employed. So close to 90% of our workforce is in the informal economy. Remember, Prime Minister Modi had once famously said in an interview, how can you say that Indians are unemployed when so many of them are making pakoras? Well, they are making pakoras not because it's their ambition, but because it's their compulsion. And to do those pakoras, they are missing out on upgrading their skills, missing out on social security, missing out on higher income. And I know a lot of people say, if you are self-employed, aren't you also creating jobs by hiring people to work for you? Well, again, based on government's own data, less than 5% of those 57% self-employed are actual employers. A majority are either working alone or with a few partners, officially known as own account workers, or worse, are unpaid workers in family enterprises. Now, you may think, okay, so traditionally most of our labor force has been in the informal sector, but are we at least moving towards a more formalized workforce? After all, we've had GST, we've had Make in India, we've cut corporate taxes, the government has been doing a lot of business related reforms, government and the RBI keep saying that private investment is picking up. So if companies are investing more, are people moving from informal to the formal economy? Not really. I mean, the share of casual workers are going down, which is probably a silver lining, but the proportion of self-employed people is zooming up, higher than they were before the pandemic. And the reverse is happening with regular workers. After the pandemic, their share in the workforce has dropped and is still continuing to drop. So what does the government have to say about this? Frustratingly, most of the ministers and commentators supporting the government avoid this inconvenient trend and instead try to divert the narrative by picking up a different benchmark. They say, look at the number of people signing up for EPFO, Employees Provident Fund Organization. So basically, any organization in the country employing at least 20 people need to register their workers with EPFO. So they have to contribute to the Provident Fund. And in the past few years, the government has started publishing data on how many people are registering on EPFO. Of course, some are joining, some are leaving, some are returning. So the logic is that if you have the net number of people signing up for EPFO, then those are the people with regular salaries working in formal registered companies. That should give you a sense of formal sector employment. In theory, this might sound persuasive. And by the way, the government loves to showcase this data because the numbers are so very rosy. One of the reports cite that over 5 crore jobs were created between FY20 and FY23. I mean, just to put that in perspective, the total number of unemployed in the country is around 2 crores. I mean, you can do the math. 3.1% is the official unemployment rate, and our labor force is around 58 crores. So according to this report, if 5 crore jobs have been created, then ideally we should have zero unemployment rate in the country. In fact, when Anurag Thakur, the Minister for Information and Broadcasting, was recently questioned on unemployment, he also mentioned how about 6 crore people have registered on EPFO. Ashwini Vaishnav, our railway minister, has talked of 16 lakh new jobs being created every month, as evidenced again by this EPFO data. I don't know if you've noticed, but note how the distinction between new registrations on EPFO and new jobs created have been conveniently blurred in this narrative, because they are actually very different. Now, suppose there is a small garment factory. It is employing 30 people. It is not registered with the EPFO. Tomorrow, the government has an awareness campaign. Tells them that if they don't register, they'll be violating labor laws, makes it easy for them to do the registration. So the owner says, what the hell? Let me register with EPFO. So those 30 people now get reflected in the EPFO statistics, in that 6 crore number that the minister was talking about. But are those 30 new jobs being created? No, they were always there. Similarly, suppose you are running a small business and you have 18 workers, so below the 20 worker threshold that is needed for you to register with EPFO. Tomorrow, you have to hire 3 more. So now you have 21 workers. And so now you go and you register with EPFO. You may have created only 3 more jobs, but EPFO will now show 21 new registrations. All of this will be part of that 6 crore number that the government keeps quoting. And look, there are pro-establishment economists out there who are twisting and bending the EPFO data like getting toothpaste out of a finished tube to somehow show a rosier picture. But for me, the biggest contradiction comes from the government's own official employment statistics. If the government is right about rising formalization in the economy, evidenced by all these new registrations piling up in the EPFO database, then the share of regular salaried workers in the workforce should also be going up in the official employment data. But that's not the case. In fact, the actual number of regular salaried workers have hardly gone up in recent years. And the really interesting thing is that back in 2018 or so, India's chief statistician Praveen Srivastava admitted as much. He said that EPFO registrations may not represent additional jobs. The International Labour Organization's latest report on India's employment, and by the way, these guys are serious labour economists. So for me, as a macroeconomist, employment is one of the things I monitor. But for these guys, that's what they do, day in and day out. Even they have warned that EPFO data as of now is an unreliable indicator of formal job creation. And look, I understand the PR problem for the government. It has taken a bunch of well-meaning reforms to make it easier to do business in India. And still the effect of that is not showing up in labor statistics to the extent that they would like it to. And that's okay, because this is economics, it's not chemistry. That you add one thing to another and poof, you get the result. And there is no shame in that. That's how policy making should happen. You take a policy, you see the results of that, and then you learn from that and tweak the policy. So when the chief economic advisor, V. Anantha Nageshwaran, said recently that, look, the government can't solve everything. It is ultimately the commercial sector that has to do the bulk of the hiring. He's actually spot on. And look, it's not like the opposition has fresh ideas. I have looked in detail at the Congress manifesto. I'll leave a link of my video in the description. Their big talking point seems to be filling up a few lakh vacant government posts. Sure, do that. But that doesn't solve the problem of around 40 crore people out of the labor force and nearly 90% of our workforce in the informal sector. And if your idea to solve that is to pay 1 lakh rupees for every graduate signing up for apprenticeship, or forgiving all education loans, which could end up costing the government over 1 lakh crore rupees, and in the process blow up India's fiscal deficit and risk higher inflation, well, that's really not much of a plan. Which brings us to the biggest mystery of it all. If India is indeed growing by 7 to 8% every quarter, then why aren't jobs being created? Why is it that formal sector jobs are not picking up? So in FY24, the second advance estimate for growth is roughly 7%, well actually 6.9%. What has driven this growth? Well, a bulk of it has come from the financial, real estate and business services sector. The white bars are the contribution to the headline growth of 7%. But have a look at the orange bar next to it. The proportion of the workforce employed in that sector that is less than 3%. So all that prosperity that the sector is generating is nowhere close to the number of people that it can employ. On the other end of the spectrum, agriculture employs almost half of the workforce, but has contributed the least to India's growth in FY24. And what has happened for India is that it's not like people haven't moved away from agriculture, but they have mostly shifted to construction, where government's massive increase in infrastructure investment and the recovering real estate sector has created a lot of demand for labor. It is also showing up in the trade and hospitality sectors. So basically, Indians have moved directly from agriculture to services, bypassing manufacturing. And this is the crucial bit that has been missing in India's growth story. And that has been a very important part of the stories of China and other Asian competitors. In fact, you can see that the share of manufacturing workers actually declined between 2012 and 2019 and further declined after the pandemic. But wait a second. Isn't the government going on and on about Make in India, attracting foreign investments to set up factories here, or offering production-linked incentives, which are essentially subsidies given to firms based on how much they're producing here? We are now increasingly assembling mobile phones here. People are talking of semiconductors, defense production, solar panels. They are now even planning to do aircraft manufacturing here. So why are we still not seeing the impact in terms of higher manufacturing employment? Why is that still falling? Well, because employment isn't really the main motivation here. It is instead to fortify our economy and to prevent our foreign exchange escaping abroad in imports. So for instance, when Air India or Indigo places orders of hundreds of aircrafts with Boeing and Airbus, imagine if we could save even a fraction of that cost by having homegrown companies catering to their needs. And I suspect a lot of this has to do with India's geopolitical priorities. Like many other countries, especially the Western powers, India too is realizing that it can't afford to over-rely on China for its supply chain. And if it wants to conduct an Atmanirbhar foreign policy, it also needs to move towards a more Atmanirbhar economic policy. All of these are very important national priorities. But make no mistake, these industries, like semiconductors or electronics, they need machines more than people. And the people that they need are also those who need to be highly skilled and educated, which India typically has a shortage of. To soak up the crores of unskilled, poorly literate labor force with low productivity, India needs to additionally work on two more things. First, it needs to start taking its labor-intensive industries equally seriously, the non-sexy ones, like textiles, plastics, food processing, footwear, sports goods. These are the industries which need a lot of labor to run. You need to actively work at making micro and small enterprises the growth engines, which means ensuring that they get cheap credit, ensuring a cheap cost of doing business, so cutting down red tape, cutting down local level corruption that they face, and exposing them to export markets, which will allow them to expand from micro to small and from small to medium, and who knows, one day from medium to large enterprises. And the second thing that India needs to get right is to get its youth properly skilled. When you're going outstation by car and you're passing this remote district in the middle of nowhere, and then suddenly on the side of the highway, you find this palatial compound with dozens of buildings, and you see a huge gate with the name of a university you've never heard of, and a large billboard next to it saying that all courses available: engineering, medicine, management, social sciences, archaeology, molecular biology, you name it. It's like a supermarket of degrees. And as you whiz past that massive campus, you're left wondering, yahan kaun padhta hoga? Well, it turns out a lot of our students, burning through cash in the hope that they somehow get a job after they get the degree. But there's a reason you've never heard of that university, because it's actually rubbish. And so on one side we have zombie students. On paper they are very educated, but in real life they are not employable. Hiring managers face this problem regularly. After the top layer of college graduates, they find that candidates are just not good enough. Driven to desperation, graduates and postgraduates, on the other hand, in many parts of India, are either in an eternal wait for a government job or are doing random things like opting to give tuition to students either informally or by joining some kind of classes, ironically teaching the next batch of students who will join the labor force that has already failed them. Now, in theory, the government has a lot of things going on. It has a Skill India mission that is supposed to give industry relevant skills to the youth and help them get jobs. In fact, the Indian government across decades, across various political parties, across states have had loads of skill development programs and missions and yojanas, most of the times with really ambitious targets. But in practice, most of them have struggled on the ground to change India's ground realities. Estimates suggest that the coming decade will be the last one where the share of our working age population will rise, because after 2036, this demographic advantage is projected to stabilize and the proportion of youth in our population will be falling. The party is about to come to an end and we are still nowhere close to dancing. For more such insights, like, share and subscribe to The Bond Economist.